الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على سبيله إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So today inshallah ta'ala we'll continue in our lesson in Ilm al-Mustalah, and we've been covering the book At-Timithi fi Ulum al-Hadith by Ibn Mulakin rahimahullah, which is of a book that is written as for beginners regarding learning the science of Ilm al-Hadith. And in the last lesson that we had, that we were covering concerning Hadith al-Da'if, so we cover a matter relating to Hadith al-Da'if, and that covered the area of the book where the author rahimahullah mentioned concerning Hadith Aqsam al-Hadith Thalatha, where he mentioned that concerning Hadith, that in general, that Hadith, that they are divided into three categories. The first being Sahih, and we discussed concerning Sahih, which is Hadith being authentic, and that's of the highest level. Then we discussed concerning second level, which is Hadith al-Hasan, which also is a level which is said to be Hadith, which is Maqbul, acceptable, and also used as a proof. And also we discussed concerning those two categories of Hadith regarding Sahih wal Hasan, that there are certain conditions that if those conditions are fulfilled, then Hadith is graded as Sahih or Maqbul. Then we discussed the third category, as the author rahimahullah mentioned, Ibn Mulakin, that he mentioned the third category of Hadith is Hadith ad-Da'if. And we discussed concerning Hadith ad-Da'if is those Hadith that forfeit or did not fulfill all the condition of Hadith Sahih. So because of forfeiting, missing some of those conditions of Hadith Sahih or Hadith Maqbul, then they're said to be Da'if. And we discuss other related matters pertaining to those topics. So as we had said in the last lesson, that in this lesson that we'll try to now put some examples regarding the hukum, or what have been discussed regarding some hadith. So we'll give some examples regarding some hadith, and you will find that ulama regarding concerning grading or passing judgment on hadith and the study of hadith, a particular hadith, that either you'll find that one, a hadith that they all agree upon that hadith is that the hadith is sahih. So there's an agreement between the ulama that this particular hadith is sahih. Then also you have a next discussion regarding some hadith where also the ulama that they agree upon those hadith being weak. So there's an agreement between the ulama that this particular hadith is weak. Then we have a third a third category of hadith where the ulama they disagree regarding those hadith said to be da'if or to be categorized as weak. So some may all hadith to be sahih, while others may all hadith to be weak. And that's the area you find sometimes area of confusion regarding which of those judgment one should take. Those who say the hadith is authentic, sahih, or should one go with those the hadith is da'if. So concerning how do we navigate in a situation like this regarding for the person who is not a specialist in this particular field. So today inshallah we'll try to mention some cases and give some examples, and also so give some example regarding some hadith that are discussed and how they are looked at with, amongst the ulama, between the ulama. And second, that we'll discuss certain books that can be used as a means to assist us in knowing what grading a hadith is given by the ulama of hadith. So we'll start with that first inshallah ta'ala regarding those books that we can use as a tool and to assist us in knowing how to know what grading have been given to hadith by those who are specialized in this field. So as for those books that have in contemporary times, that those books that they refer to as book of takhrij, so books that are known to be kutub takhrij al-hadith, so books that kind of somewhat they give takhrij, and takhrij, it's those books that they try to find a hadith, or they look at hadith, study hadith, and they'll give you the asl of the hadith regarding those books that are the primary source of the hadith, that mention that hadith with its full isnad, and also they'll pass a judgment on the final conclusion ruling on that particular hadith. So that those books, they are to tell you where the sources that you can find this hadith with a complete isnad, with its chain. And second, that they'll now study the hadith regarding the narrators and all those the rules of hadith, and then come to a final conclusion as to what is the appropriate ruling for this particular hadith, whether hadith to be deemed to be sahih or hasan or da'if accordingly, based upon, as we mentioned, did the hadith, this particular hadith, fulfill the criteria of Sahih or it didn't. So those are the books of Takhrij. Regarding concerning Takhrij, those books of Takhrij that give us those aid us in that field, we can somewhat mention books primarily regarding books that relates to al-fiqh, because you find that those books that they play a very important role regarding if the hadith is Sahih or Hasan, it is used as a proof, and if the hadith is weak, then it is not used as a proof. And in sometimes those books of al-fiqh that you might find books that are not authentic but is not mentioned by the author of that particular book. So regarding those books, we have concerned that ulama of hadith are those who give some attention to this particular science of hadith, that they have looked at the books of the fuqaha that are well known and established in a particular madhab. So the madhab of the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and the Hanabila, they have books that are said to be books that are renowned in those particular madhahib, and the ulama of hadith then go to some of those books and then try to extract the ahadith in those books and also pass judgment on them. So the person concerned who is maybe involved in fiqh, it is important for them to know and is acquainted with these books of takhrij that are there and available, and use them accordingly. So of those books concerning at-takhrij, concerning that we have concerning in the book a book that is called Nasb al-Raya li Ahadith al-Hidayah. So this book is written by Zayla'i, and Zayla'i is a Hanafi, but a person also have ilm al-Hadith. And al-Zayla'i that he wrote this book Nasb al-Raya li Ahadith al-Hidayah, where he went to one of the famous books of the Hanafi, which is a book called Hidayah, and he extracted all the hadith that is mentioned in this book, and then kind of somewhat checked them and gave a checking and a grading of those hadith. So that book became a very important book regarding the person who wished to know the hadith that are used as ahkam in the books of the amongst the Hanafi, from the book of Hidayah, which is a well-known established book amongst the Hanafi. So the book that checked that book, that give us the grading of those hadith, as we mentioned, the name of the book is Nasb al-Raya li Ahadith al-Hidayah by Zayla'i, rahimahullah. A second is a book that is called Badr al-Munir fi takhrij ahadith wal-athar waqi'i fi Sharh al-Kabir lil-Rafi'i. So the second book, also a very important book, that it is named Al-Badr al-Munir في تخريج أحاديث والآثار واقع في شرح الكبير للرافعي. So Al-Rafi rahimahullah, one of the ulama, kibar ulama of the Shafi'iyya, of Madhab al-Shafi. So you have a book that is called, they call that book that it is called, some refer to it Al-Sharh al-Kabir, some refer to it Al-Hawi al-Kabir, but of the rate, it is also referred to as the book that is called Fath al-Aziz. Fath al-Aziz. So this book by Al-Rafi is a book that explains concerning the fiqh al-Hanafi, that goes into detail. And this book, Badr al-Munir, went to grade and to check those hadiths. And this book is by Ibn Mulaqin. So as we mentioned before, Ibn Mulaqin rahimahullah is Shafi, and also he checked this book of Rafi regarding a hadith that is used in the method of the Shafi. So that book that we mentioned is in print, Badr al-Munir. Then we find that Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, that he came and he make like a summary of the book of Ibn Mulaqin, Badr al-Munir, and it is called, the full name in this print is called Kitab al-Tamyiz fi Talkhis Takhrij Ahadith Sharh al-Wajiz, which is known, it is more popularly known as Al-Talkhis al-Habir. Al-Talkhis al-Habir Habir by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah. So this book is to check, is like also another source that is used regarding ahadith in the method of the Shafi'iyya, that is used concerning ahkam. So it's important or useful regarding a person who wants to go into the science of fiqh, also to have this as a tool that he use along with him. Another book that's concerning that book, another book that is there. We have the book concerning by Sheikh Albani rahimahullah. So we have discussed concerning. So another of those books in that field is the book of Sheikh Albani rahimahullah. And Sheikh Albani rahimahullah, that he went to one of the book of the Hanabila. So went to one of the books of the Hanabila and also checked the hadith in that particular book of the, which is called Manar al-Sabil. So book that is known as Manar al-Sabil, a book of the Hanabila regarding fiqh. So Shaykh Albani rahimullah, that he went to this book and that he extracted all the hadith and the likes, and then he went on to check and to grade them. And he named that book that he wrote, Shaykh Albani rahimullah, Irwal al-Ghalil fi takhrij ahadith Manar al-Sabil. Irwal al-Ghalil fi takhrij ahadith Manar al-Sabil. So that's another book that is useful regarding knowing some of the books, knowing those ahadith of ahkam that is used in the method of the Hanabila. And also you find also another of the ulama of the Hanabila who did also a checking of the books of the Hanabila, and of those books that are also the same, similar in that field of takhrij of books of the books of the method of the Hanbali. It's the book that is called Tankih At-Taqiq fi Ahadith At-Tahliq, and this is written by Al-Hafiz Ibn Abd al-Hadi Al-Hanbali, where he checked one of the books of the Hanbali regarding, that is used regarding matters relating to fiqh. So there are some of the books in that particular field, as we mentioned, and you have other books similar to those in different sciences concerning tafsir, in books also in the science of usul al-fiqh, also in concerning raqa'iq, regarding concerning, for example, the books of Ghazali, that is the books of Ihya Ulumuddin. Also that book also have been checked regarding a hadith that is used in that particular book. So the ulama of hadith have somewhat done that service regarding checking other books of people who may not be that specialized in the field of hadith, check the hadith that they use to clarify whether the hadith is of the level of Sahih, Hasan, or Da'if. And you find concerning another book that is called Al-Hidayah fi Takhrij Ahadith Bidayah, which is a book concerning Bidayah wal-Mujtahid. So Bidayah al-Mujtahid is a famous book in comparative fiqh that is also used in some universities, and one of the ulama of contemporary time that also went on to check those hadith in this book, Bidayah al-Mujtahid. So many books that are there, even you find that still the cycle still continue, where some of the contemporaries, that one of the book that is famous in the method of the Hanabila, that is called Rawd al-Murba', that of a known book in the fiqh of one of the established books in the fiqh of the Hanbali. So someone wrote a Rawda al-Mumta' fi Takrij Ahadith Rawd al-Murba'. So this still continues regarding checking of books of the madhahib. So that's concerning that. I would say is a tool to assist a person regarding how to in studying of fiqh, and also side by side with this also a book that can assist him regarding a hadith that are mentioned in those books of the fuqaha. So that's concerning from that aspect. So you have those tools that are there to assist the talibul ilm. Then, as we mentioned, that now give some, the second aspect of this lesson now also to give some now examples of a hadith that are there, and regarding concerning how those hadith have been studied and the conclusion of those hadith based upon what have been mentioned by the ulama of hadith. So we'll start off with regarding concerning those hadith. So we'll start today inshallah ta'ala, and of those hadiths that we'll find that so the important thing is to know what have been said by the ulama, and then see how we can weigh things up. So of those hadith that are there is regarding concerning a hadith that have been narrated upon the Prophet ﷺ regarding giving one taslimatun wahida fi salat, regarding concerning ending the salat. Is it what's the ruling regarding giving one taslim, saying assalamu alaikum, and not saying to the right only or to one side, and not saying the second taslim? What's concerning this matter? So what have been said regarding the hadith that relates to this particular topic? Are there hadith, and what have been said regarding those hadith? And yes, there are hadith on that particular topic. So you have some hadith that have been narrated upon the Prophet ﷺ regarding just giving one taslim to end the salat. So regarding those hadiths, that you find those hadiths have been studied of ulama of old regarding that particular matter. And amongst the ulama, you might find sometimes those of the ulama who hold those hadith to be authentic, and also we'll find another group of the ulama who hold those hadiths on that topic that they are not authentic, right? So that's concerning looking at that matter. So we'll find concerning that that particular matter regarding of the ulama who holds a hadith in general regarding that saying one taslim, that there's hadith that give one taslim and those hadith are authentic. Of those ulama who hold that view that those hadith are authentic, we have Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, we have the likes of Shawkani, also we have the likes of contemporaries Ahmed Shakir and also Shaykh Albani rahimahullah jamihan. So those of the ulama who are somewhat old take the position that a hadith that relates to giving one taslim of going back to the Prophet of Islam, that those hadith are authentic. Some of those hadith are authentic. So that's concerning those. Then we have others who may take a different view. So in looking at that matter, we'll find that of the ulama who have stated that who somewhat you find that Ibn Hajar or Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah, his book Fath al-Bari, he mentioned قد روي أن النبي عليه السلام أنه كان يسلم تسليمة واحدة من وجوه لا يصح منه شيء. قاله that Ibn Rajab rahimahullah al-Hanbali, he mentioned in his book Fath al-Bari that there have been narrations upon the Prophet Islam, upon the Prophet Islam regarding giving one taslim, and those ahadith, there are many, but none of those hadith are authentic. None of those hadith are authentic. And also, of those who have taken that position before, Ali ibn Madini, Athram, Uqayli, and others. So you find the ulama of old. So you find that regarding these ahadith that relates to giving one taslim to end the salat, a group of the ulama, as we mentioned, all those hadith to be authentic. And we'll find also a group of the ulama of old who hold those hadith to be non-authentic, those hadith to be weak. Also you find, for example, Ahmed ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, that he said on this matter, لا نعرف أن النبي عليه السلام في تسليمة واحد إلا حديث المرسل لابن شهاب الزهري أن النبي عليه السلام. So Imam Ahmed rahimahullah, that also of the ulama of old concerning that, he doesn't know of any hadith upon a prophet regarding giving one taslim except واحدة إلا حديث مرسل, except for hadith which is mursal. So all the hadith, they are weak except for the best of those hadith, the hadith which is mursal, an Zuhri. And by the fact they mentioned the hadith is mursal, the hadith doesn't have a continuous chain. So he mentioned that Marasil ibn Zuhri is also to be adaf Marasil. So they show concern those hadith regarding this topic of the ulama of old, that they can somewhat hold those hadith to be da'if. Also it is stated, like At-Timithi rahimahullah, he mentioned, لا نعرفه مرفوها إلا من هذا وجه. That At-Timithi rahimahullah, that he mentioned, قال محمد ibn Ismail yani al-Bukhari, that also all concerning that those hadith also, that there's some discussion regarding those hadith. So you find that the ulama of old, that they have mentioned that Imam Bukhari, the considered Zuhair ibn Muhammad, one of the narrators of this hadith, Ali Sham yarwuna anhu manakir, that Imam Bukhari mentioned that of those narrators of the hadith regarding giving one taslim, one of the narrators, Zuhair ibn Muhammad, but he mentioned Ali Sham, the people of Sham, that they narrate upon him matter which is manakir, indicating that there is weakness in his hadith. So it shows regarding that, you'll find regarding this particular matter, that there's a discussion between the ulama regarding that matter. You find that Al-Hakim, who narrate this hadith, also hadith to be authentic, but we find a concerning there, Kibar al-Ulama of old this hadith to be weak, relating a hadith that goes back to the Prophet Islam, giving only one taslim to end the salat. But you find some narration upon the Salaf that they have done this, but going back to him, the Prophet Islam, those hadith is weak. So he shows regarding that, in looking at those hadith, as mentioned by Abu Hatim al-Razi, huwa munkar innama huwa an Aisha mawqufan, regarding hadith Going back to the Prophet Islam regarding giving one taslim, the hadith is munkar, but this hadith actually goes back to Aisha, as she is the one who narrates this particular hadith. So it shows regarding that on these matters that sometimes it's good for a person to go back, as the hadith of Aisha anha, he mentioned concerning hadith, he mentioned hadith Zuhair ibn Muhammad and Hisham ibn Awra and Abihi and Aisha عنها أن النبي عليه السلام كان يسلم في الصلاة تسليمة واحدة تلقاء وجهه ثم يميل إلى شق الأيمن شيء. So Aisha عنها, she's the one who narrated this hadith upon the Prophet Islam, that he alayhi salam, that he would give one taslim to his right, slightly to his right, so he moved his face slightly to the right. So she mentioned that Islam was that he would a widow, that she narrated this particular hadith. But as Abu Hatim al-Razi, that I mentioned the hadith upon her, there's some discussion. The hadith is somewhat weak, dismissed, and the reality, according to him, that he mentioned that the hadith actually goes back to Aisha and not to the Prophet Islam. So he showed that ulama, regarding the ulama of old, that they kind of somewhat have dismissed those ahadith that mention about one taslim as being weak, all weak, and the best scenario, those hadith are more mawkuf, going back to some of the Sahaba, but not upon the Prophet Islam. So it shows regarding that the person that regarding these matters seen as to, and I'll also mention that also you'll find some of the ulama, al-Hakim, who authenticate the hadith. Also you'll find concerning that we mentioned that Ibn Hajar, Ahmed Shakir, Shawkani, Sheikh Albani rahimahullah, of those of more contemporary, of the scholars of more recent, that they are the ones who are going to somewhat more give a more authentic hadith. But in comparing, who do we follow? So it's not about per se looking at the names. If it was by way of names, then those names concerning Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Ibn Rajab, also Ibn Abdul Barr, Abu Hatim al-Razi, their names will outshine any of the names of those contemporaries. So if we were to look at names, then we for sure give precedent to the ulama of old. Okay, and we mentioned those names that we mentioned, or all the hadith to be, all those hadith to be daif. Also, so the next thing is by looking at by way of the merit of the hadith itself. So either we look at the names of those who, if we want to go that route, but also the important thing is look at the merit of what have been put forth by both. Does those hadith fulfill the criteria of authenticity, or they do not? So that goes back to studying the hadith and then coming to a conclusion, which is for those people who are more grounded in that particular field. But the point is knowing that you might find some hadiths that there's a discussion between the ulama. Those who say it is authentic and those who say it is not. And how do we balance in trying to come to a conclusion? But it also should the person, if it's person that too, it required then for the person to look more into the hadith and know that there's a difference between the ulama, those who may go this way or those who might sway that way based upon their study of those hadiths. So that's concerning that particular matter or that particular hadith. And you might find other hadith that are similar to that, and sometimes you find some of those hadith that are somewhat famous or somewhat well known. Another hadith that is famous, that there's some discussion between the ulama on that particular hadith, is a hadith that goes back to the Prophet Islam, or narrated upon the Prophet Islam, that mentioned min husn Islam al-mar tarkuhu ma la ya'ni. Min husn Islam al-mar, that the beauty of a person Islam is tarkuhu, leaving away those things that does not concern them, which a hadith that is most of us are aware of and mention a lot. So this particular hadith, they mention the hadith is narrated by At-Timithi and others who have narrated this particular hadith. Then you find, for example, the hadith, as Ibn Rajab rahimahullah, he mentioned, هذا hadith kharajahu, this hadith, it is narrated by At-Timithi, Ibn Majah. So At-Timithi wa Ibn Majah. Then he mentioned concerning the isnad of that hadith that goes back to Abu Hurairah anhu. Then he mentioned, قال At-Timithi, this hadith gharib, indicating that there's some matter with the hadith. And you'll find, for example, the likes An-Nawawi, Imam An-Nawawi, that mentions particular hadith in his Arba'in, that An-Nawawi rahimahullah, he all the hadith to be Hasan. So An-Nawawi rahimahullah, that he all this hadith to be Hasan. But you find that of the ulama, majority of the ulama who have discussed this particular hadith, that they have all this hadith to be da'if. And I mentioned that what is sahih, that this particular hadith, as those who all the hadith did not per se authenticate the hadith, or all the hadith to be weak. You have the likes of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, all the hadith to be mursal, Yahya ibn Ma'in, of the ulama of old, of the kibar ulama hadith, Imam Bukhari wa Daraqutni. So those names, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Yahya ibn Ma'in, Bukhari, Daraqutni, there's no one that after those people that can be compared to them regarding their level of knowledge of hadith. So those four giants, all in hadith, regarding their ilm, mountains of knowledge, all in hadith to be daif, then for anyone to come after to say otherwise, they have to come very strong. They have to come with some very strong evidence and proof to go against what they have mentioned. So you'll find concerning that the likes of An-Nawawi rahimahullah, even likes of Ibn Abdul Barr, all the hadith to be daif, mahfud, the hadith is mursal. So you find that the hadith upon Zuhri, so you find that concerning you have these matters sometimes where you find a difference between the ulama. And it's important to say that look the hadith by way of, either by way of not, is we can look by way of the names of the ulama, on which side or which position they have taken, but also the main thing is able can look at the hadith by the merit of the hadith, regarding did the hadith fulfill the condition of sahih, or it forfeit one of those conditions, so that other person is somewhat able to make that final judgment. But it requires a person who have some type of background knowledge in the science of hadith, and also knowing the source that he can refer back to kind of somewhat give a little insight into where the correct view may lies. So that is the general, but that is the general. Give some idea regarding you have those hadith that there is a degree of discussion between the ulama. So one have to be somewhat so for the personal talibul ilm, that for try to be of those who are the teachers, the educators, and more advanced in their study, that to be equipped with knowing those books that are there, that are present, that can assist them in knowing what is the final conclusion of hadith. So having those books that they use, and they are sufficient of those books that are there, that can be used to assist the person in coming to that conclusion. And we have mentioned some example of those. And with that, inshallah ta'ala, we'll end for today, and we'll continue with the next lesson regarding from where we have left off in the book At-Tadhkira fi Ulum al-Hadith by Ibn Malak rahimahullah. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه إلى سبيل والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.